Now let's get more serious and do the next scenario, which is very specific. So we have this whale, and this whale is coming toward the camera, as you can see here, and we need this whale to swim until it's almost near the camera, then it will sink down, waving here with his tail and forming a certain kind of wave. Now the front wave of this whale, we need it to increase, like pushing up until it's just forming some kind of heavy or big or high wave. So it will increase the action before it sinks down, and in the next shot it's supposed to jump from here. So it sinks, then jump from here. Let's do this one, then we will see how to do with the next one. So all we need to do is we need to optimize our scene, and what I mean about optimizing our scene is to use the minimum resources we can. So the movement of this whale is different from previous scene, but it's fast enough and it's speeding up. So if we look at it from here, play the animation, I will hide just the container here so we can have faster playback, speeding up a little, then slowing down, but it doesn't seem like speeding or doing anything. It's just continuously swimming toward the camera. Now all we need to do is to create domain, and again we'll create this animation guide, which is just a box. We will animate the box first with the whale. So as you will notice now, let me hide the camera and the lights, as well as the two shading utilities, and let's see. So the whale start moving, and if you want we can see even the sea here, which is just a plan. So the whale start moving and the box is still not moving. If you notice, again I will go back to wireframe. Now it start moving. When it start moving, start with ease, and that's so important. Now it's speeding up just to make sure it's the same speed as the whale, and now here the whale stopped moving, but our container with the helper is continuing its move. Now just to note here, the whale is underwater, so it doesn't matter if our container is above the whale or not. And we added this animation just to ease its coming out, because else we will have it stopping here, and because everything is built based on the same principle we mentioned before, which is the motion interior, which allows the water to speed up in a way which made it possible for this container to just follow the animation and have minimum size. So again, just make sure to slow down the container. Now let's jump again to our scene, and let's look at it with the water level dummy object. This is it. It's coming up and down, then it sinks here. After we create this box, which is just to follow the animation, we create this container which is roughly around the whale, and we just link the container to the box. That's it. So we have the container moving with the box always. Let's hide the box, we don't need it, and let's start studying everything. Now the level of this wall, it's better than before. If you notice, before I did create one and it was low, so most of the whale was up. Now no, it's good. Only the tip of the whale is there until its tail coming out. So let's hide the sea and let's start navigating with the grid. So the first thing to do is that I will go through these. Of course, we need to activate motion interior to make sure that we can follow the animation of the whale without creating very long and big container which gonna consume all our resources. The fill water is 20. This is based on the height of the sea. So if you notice here, and I will go to wireframe, this is 20% of this, so that's why I bought 20%. And down steps per frame, as I mentioned before, I always try to keep this as 1, because sometimes you will need to create 2 steps or 3 or 4, and that's because your object is speeding up. But if you can just lower it, if you can manage with 1, that would be the best scenario, because it's the most accurate one. Time scale is the same, nothing here changed. I didn't change anything here. Basically, I'm not activating wetting because we will not even see the whale most of the animation, and there's no need for active body because we don't have any ship or anything. For the foam, let's introduce some of the foams. Now, if you remember, we usually put splash and introduce the foam from here, but in this scenario I want to introduce a huge amount of foam, and when it's needed, huge amount of foam, we can introduce it from here. So I will just put 1 here and start seeing if that will be good, and I will increase the settings ongoing when needed. Let's go down, and here we have half-life, and I don't want this amount. I can bring it down to 2. I don't want them to live so much. Also the max outside, I want them actually to live outside, because I want every particle comes out here to cover this area, the foam particles. And for the size, I can just keep it as it is and start increasing or decreasing ongoing. But I know this scale is big based on the previous scene we start working on, so I will just change it to this. Now I don't need to change these numbers, distribution and anything, because we are not into seeing the bubbles. B2B, of course, 0. I just bring it to 0 because I don't need it in such scenarios. Rising speed, and this is good. Basically, I will just leave it as it is, and we will see. So for the button, remember from previous scene I put it like 0.3, and that's good. It was good for that scene. And for the splashes, I need to introduce splashes. It's the leading wave, so it's extremely important to have some splashes. I don't need them to be that much, so just 5. And for the threshold, I will change it when needed. For the mist, I don't need any mist. For the foam, I don't need the splash to introduce any foam. Only the foams which is introduced by here is enough. Let's go down and see here the drag. The drag is no need for drag for mist because there is no mist, but this is good. Living outside the container is good too. And for other parameters, no need to change anything. Now I will just add this, and I will change it to include list to make sure that I have this included. No need to add his eyes or his teeth or anything of that, because we will not see it. Most of him is covered under water. Now let's go to the output, and already I created a file which we can put the same file, and I called it low res, where I can put all the low resolution simulation before I increase the settings and start introducing a serious amount of particles. So let's go here from this view, and let's hide the sea mesh, and let's start simulating some frames, just also to make sure we have fairly big cell size, so we have few particles, 1.5 almost million voxels, and all we need to do is to keep our eyes here to see the amount of particles created during the simulation. So I will start simulating now, and I will come back as soon as I have some particles. So let's see everything now, and we can have an idea about how everything is moving. Let's activate the liquid particles, splashes, and the foam, and let's display them with 100% so we can see better presentation. Because we have just a few amount of particles, we will see really good how they are acting. Now it's a little white here, more than it should be, so I say auto here for the speed of liquid, and that will just allow me to see the other particles. Everything seems good, and contained within this I can extend it right and left more, but because the particles, the foam and the splash particles are allowed to go out, that will cover the areas which I don't want to see. Again, now because it's speeding up and down, going up and down, now I can see more waves. It's all I need to take care for here is that this liquid is within this border, not the other liquids. And just to make sure, I can hide the foam and the splashes and see if the liquid is inside. Okay, it's barely inside, but it's acting really well. I can see it from here. If you want, you can see it. Although here I can see it from the other perspective. Looking at it from here, that's nice. This is what I want. This is the effect I want, and the leading wave is so good. And this is all because the scale of the scene is good. Now this is nice. As soon as this is formed, it will jump here, then the next one will be larger because there is energy now. This is it. So we have 1 and 2 and 3 pushing each other, accumulating, and this is exactly the effect I am seeking. It's, if you notice, 1, 2, 3. Here maybe it's clear more. 1, 2, 3. This is all because of its movement. It's fast enough, but not fast much. Everything seems good until we reach here. Then it sinks down and everything seems within our control. It doesn't matter the angle, it's just different angle. But again, now let's see the other particles. Let's hide the liquid and see the splashes. They seem good. They will be created in the early stages here, and they extend right and left. As you can see, this is exactly what we are seeking, is that 1, 2, 3 based on the waves, and this is what gonna give us the impulse or the impact we need to see. Then it will create one final wave, and that's it. This is all you need to have. And last thing is the foam itself, which should be big enough. So I will go to foam and I will activate it, and I will just deactivate the splashes. Let's see, show the foam. For some reason it's not there. I think we didn't create it. So let's go and change a few things. The first thing here, it seems with these settings I'm not creating any foam. So let's go back and change a few settings and make sure that we have something here. So let's reduce this number to 0.2, something like 0.3 or 0.29, anything around, and I will make its life like shorter because I don't want them to stay a lot in the air. I'll keep this as it is, and for its radio as the previous scene, it is good. 5300 is good. Again, rising speed, and this one is important because I want them to stay in the air a little more, and this is totally controlled by this parameter. If I will increase this, they will stay more, but they will be slowing down fast, and if I will decrease it, they will be staying in the air. If I will increase it, they will stay in the air less. If I decrease it, they will just stuck in the air, even if I will decrease it to a certain degree. So that's it for here. And for the splashes, I also find them a lot. Maybe I have to do something, maybe I have to reduce their number or something, but I will leave it now as it is. Here I don't need to change things because I don't want to create other things, and for them living outside of the box 2 is good, and that's it. And the liquidity is nice here in this scene. Similar scenes, we don't need to change much here. So that's it. Now let's watch the number of particles, the amount of particles. As you can see, I don't have forms because I didn't meet the conditions, and we weren't able to create any forms. But for now, I think we are good. We can see that we will see some of these. So the total amount was 300, and if I will go here, like in this frame where I should see some splashes, they were like 2000 and something, which is nothing. If I go back to the output, sorry, for here, and let me just show the splashes. Splashes are still in early stages. So if I will go here and see here where they should be really presented well, here they are 24, like 10% of the total amount of liquid, which is not much. I can see that we can create much more than these. So the forms will be much more. Our main dependency here on the form, but this is good for now. I will not create other things. So let's do another simulation and see the results, and based on that we will know exactly what are we waiting to see. So what I will do also, I will increase the grid resolution, and let's see something close to final. So I will increase it once, twice, 3 times, and maybe 4 times. I would say 5 times, so it's 42 millions, which is decent for this scene. We are not very close up, and the amount of particles should be really good. And let's just start simulating things. I will press start and I'll come back when everything is ready. Now we finished from the simulation. It didn't take much time, but we have a lot of frames. We have almost 400 and more frames, but again it's really fast compared to the other simulations because we have just one step to simulate. And let's see, we have 8 millions, which is good for particles in this volume, and again it's far from the camera, it's not that close, but anyway it's good amount of particles. Let's just, before we start moving, let's just go here and auto reduction so we don't see all the particles together. So I will just say 3 maybe, and we'll start moving the time slider to see. Now the idea here, whenever you increase the amount of particles, the magic starts. As you can see here, I have already at the beginning 2 millions of particles here for the foam, which almost 3 millions, which is very good amount, and based on my preferences, it's good to have this amount of particles. For the splashes, not as much as I want, but they are good. Let's just go further. Here we have foam like 8 millions, which again is more than I want, but it's good. And because it's all this scene is depending basically on the foam, how the foam gonna appear, more foam is good as long as it's controllable. So again, let's go to this frame and see. We have here, let's wait until it updates. Again, I'm using my small computer, so it's not as good as the one which has more RAMs and more processing power, just to make sure that you know that this can work on your computer. 80 millions, huge amount of particles. Let's go more. Here 81, and it's almost 100,000, which is not much, but again here 27 millions for the foam particle, which is a lot, but again no problem. Let's see what we can do about that and how it will look in front of our camera. Here in this frame the foam should be like going down a little, but we still have 23 millions, and before it sinks down we have a lot of particles, 28. What I did just one thing which I want to show you, because I know that we will go here and here, everything should go down because the whale is sinking down, and I don't want them to stay much here because the second scene should start from empty scene. It's just empty sea without any foam. One technique to reduce their number is to animate the foam generation and the splashes. So I can just introduce some frames. If you notice here in this frame, I started animating the life for the foam and its amount and threshold, as well as for the splashes. If I will go next frame, I will see that I increased here the threshold, so I'm not allowing the less fast particles, liquid particles, to generate any splashes, and that's a good technique. 1 instead of 5 or 10 to reduce their numbers. The same I did here, and else everything is good and the lifespan is less, so I kill them as long as I can. And if you can see at the last frame, almost they disappear. If there will be more, because of course, as you know, I'm displaying some of these, not the total number. If there will be anything more here, with the shader we can just also kill the others, because in the shader we can reduce their size or their alpha or even their radius, and we can kill them. So that's amazing. Now we have everything ready and we can start rendering. Let's do a few steps before we start rendering things, but again, before we do that, let's look at it from another perspective. So this is the start, and now if you remember, look at this, and this is so good. You have some of the foam sliding from the whale surface. So if you want to look at it from this perspective, it's amazing. Here we can see very interesting pattern, which is, if we go again here to foam, this is the patterns, and because we have a correct radius, which is good here, 0.3, maybe we'll make it smaller a little. We have very clear representation for the radius and the pattern, and that's good, and they are living outside the box, so everything is cool. Let's go to another frame, and here even we can see everything more clear. If I increase the amount here in the preview to more, let's just see here, look at it, it's very clear. I will just deactivate this so I can increase this, and this is, I don't want to go more because I don't need to, but everything seems good. And now this is the leading wave, which gonna be even pushed more because the liquid is producing more ripples here. That's nice. Let's go further. Now things should be pushing up more, like here, and next. That's good. Now here we should see more particles coming up, as you can see here, and it's the same pattern of the underlying liquid. And to see that, I can go here to foam and the splashes, I don't want to see them, but I want to see the liquid, and this is exactly what is producing these waves. So that's good for now, and I can even put 8 or something, just because I don't want to display all the particles during the work. Now let's go to rendering, and in rendering I want to introduce again the ocean mesh. And the ocean mesh, I will make sure the ocean level is 20, exactly like it was in the dynamic rollout. And for horizon reference, I can introduce 1 again, just to make sure that I have a nice horizon for the ocean surface, and for the ocean subdivision 2 is enough for now. I don't need to activate anything else, except here I need to smooth it a little and make sure that I have liquid particles which take in consideration the particle size. And also here displacement, I added the same displacement we added in the last scene, and just to show that this is the one, I can just throw it in any of these. This is the one which has 2, and I just killed these because I don't need them. And that's it. For the water, I will add one material. Just choose the water and see which one I already added. If it's not here, let's just make sure. Yeah, this is it. So in this one, nothing else. I just changed this. So I presented some glossiness for the water, and here instead of having 100% white, I just reduce it a little, which gonna give us introduce some glossiness or more for the refraction, which is nice. Now all I need to start rendering is ready, and I just can jump to here and look at it from this perspective. Let's render this frame, or let's go here even at the beginning and start rendering some frames like this one, knowing that I kept the sky as I did in a previous scene, and also for the light rig which we introduced in the last section of the tutorial. This is it. All I need to do if I want to change its position is to move this, but it's good now because it's not local, so this doesn't matter. Its position, actually its direction is the most, its angle and direction is important. So let's just look at it from here and render one frame and see. And as you can see, we have the water, we have everything, but we don't have the foam and splash, and it's so dark. But it doesn't matter much in this case. All we need to do is to just rotate and change the position of the lights. That's it. But we have the right setup, so let's look from the camera, and that's what is important. And from this angle, I will re-render again, and we should see something which is decent and good, because the lighting is designed to meet this setup. Of course, again, it's just to change the light. The light is low, so we can increase its height and it will add some lights to the scene, and also we can change some of the setting for the sky. And as you can see, everything seems good, and we have a good presentation for the mesh here. As you can see, we have transparency, which is so nice, but again we can improve this in the horizon. And all I can do is to go here and pick up this container, and I can go to the rendering, roll out, and introduce 4 here, more divisions for this to improve the quality of the water, but that will increase the rendering time. And as you noticed, we have really a very small rendering time. I'm just rendering here HD ready, it's not HD even. Wait a little, and now we have that the horizon, the subdivision here improved much. But again, this 4, just converting from 2 to 4, increased the rendering time from 19 seconds for the previous frame into 2 minutes and 20 seconds almost. And that's a huge, I don't want to just consider that here. One thing to have in consideration is that if you don't consider always that there is a post-production and some solution which you can introduce post-production, that would be a big problem, because if you consider that you will get everything from the rendering here and you'll get the final image and final results, including motion blur, depth of field, and all the other things like even blending this with the background, anything like that, so you are actually killing the machine. There's always a post-production process, and if you produce the right layers and passes, you will be able to reduce your production rendering time into sometimes 20 times. So let's take in consideration this parameter also, which is the horizon roughness, and let's render one frame to see how that will affect here. Of course, we reduce this, the ocean subdivision, into 2 again to see faster results. One of the things which you can do is that usually here in the horizon there should be some kind of fog which blends both these together, and you can introduce that using V-Ray fog. See here more blending, but also you can introduce it using the atmospheric aerial, which we are gonna see now, but in general that will blend everything here, will create a layer of fog which gonna intersect this and this. But that's an option just to mention. Let me see just the last image. There is this line, if you notice this line, and maybe you can't see it much through the video, but this line is a bug in Phoenix FD, and this line basically is the horizon line is coming in front of the mesh here. So to remove this one, you can reduce this number or just kill it. Again, you have to consider post-production for this to have something very fast and decent in terms of rendering time. And now let me just show you that thing which I mentioned. So you can add here, sorry, not here, but in the environment, you can add the V-Ray aerial perspective, which can sometimes work like a fog, but it's extremely fast, and that can blend the sea with the horizon. I will not talk about it now because it's not our subject mainly, but we just think about that. Let's introduce the foam and the splash particles and tweak them so we have a good result. As we saw in the previous section, you can create the foam from here. I already created 2, one for the foam and one for the splash, and I can just choose them here in the modify panel. This is for the foam, and as you can see, this is the default setting, and I can start render now and see the foam. Also, I introduced the splashes and again default, but here I changed this into points. The only thing I did is that change this into points. Let's just render this frame and with a lower resolution so we can see the result immediately. I would say 820. As you can see, we don't have much of these particles now in this stage, but apparently everything seems good and I can see some of them now. Let's wait a little until it finishes the rendering. Nice here. Everything seems nice. That's it. Good blending between the water and the splashes and the foam. That's good. Let's go to another frame which we can see much more foam itself. In this frame, I think, let's just go here and see particles. Let's just wait for it to update. Yeah, we have some particles here. Let's see them by just rendering this frame again. Much closer view. There is the calculations for the foam shaders, and this is collecting the particles. If we will multiply their numbers 1 and 2 and 3, that there will be a stage of duplicating these in the rendering rollout. So we see that all these particles are jumping up and they are forming this straight line. Of course, we can change this by extending the emitter a little more. These are above the emitter anyway, but their shape is totally related to the shape of the water, which is, if you remember, it was trimmed here by the container, but it doesn't matter much because it looks nice. Let's just wait for this to finish. It's nice. and now we can see the whole wave. And let's just see the particles here and try to change a few things. So if we go to the foam particles, I would say that it's just white a lot compared to the environment, and what I can do is that reduce this into 0.8, which is how much it's affected by the light around it. And also I can just change these numbers by maybe just increasing the radio to present more particles, or I can leave it as it is, but I can just try. Let's go to 1.5, and also here I can always go to 1.3 as example, 0.13, just to increase their alpha. But I don't need to do that anyway. But let's just change and see the look. Again, for the splashes, the same. I don't need them to be really shiny, so I can go to 0.8, and I can introduce more radio for them here. So I would say 0.15, and here also I can just put 1.2. And again, let's activate a motion blur for both, because this is action scene and we need to see some blur, motion blur. Let's increase 0.7 and here to 0.7. Make sure to do one thing again here: deactivate this in the splashes. We don't need it to consider the phonics FD container, because we don't want it to displace with it. It will consume our RAM without any need. So now we can render a later frame, a closer frame, which everything should be really in action more. Let's just see here. This is a close frame and it can show us the quality of the particles. Maybe we'll go a little back like this before the wheel sinks down. See, it takes time to update, and let's just hide this maybe a little more. So I will go to 0 here, and we should see bigger pile of particles. Okay, we can render this. Let's just start rendering this, and I'll come back after it finishes. That's it. And it was very important to increase the radius and everything, because as you see here, they are not totally covering the background sea. And also what I can do to do that is that I can increase their number. It doesn't matter, it looks like their number is big, but actually I can benefit increasing their numbers. And I will keep this frame, and I will go to the phonics foam shader, and I will introduce some multiplication. So I will increase their number here into 3. So 3 numbers, 3 times the foam. And for splashes, I will just increase it by 2. And let's start rendering the same frame, and I will come back after it finishes. That's it, and I can see the improvement now. I can see the water behind. It's totally covered by particles. Of course, that rendering time increased, but let's just discuss one thing, is that I can do that 2 ways. The first one is to increase this more and increase this more. That will introduce bigger particles and more solid, like they are not transparent as they were. And also I can increase the size, but I don't advise that. Choose the good size in your simulation. If you see it's not suitable, you can change it from here. But that's it. Now let's do one thing. Let's go to the last frame. As I said, in the last frame I want the particles to be totally not there, so they should be disappear totally. But if you remember, if I will go here, this is the container. Some of these particles here, these are the particles. I want to kill them totally. So let's render first and see what kind of particles we have. We can see we don't have particles at all, and that's perfect. So they start fading from here to here because we reduce their life and their amount in the container itself. But I did another thing which I need to show, which I went here to the foam itself shader, and between this frame, which is here, I kept everything as it is. Then in this frame I just made them all 0. So no alpha and no radio means they will disappear anyway, and I did the same for the splashes. So that's amazing because we have two kind of controls. We can just make them disappear because the render will do that, and we can do that also because the foam will do that. Again, I will just indicate something else. If you go here and if you feel the water is a little turbulent when everything is going down, and I want it to be quiet after the wheel got down, you can simply go here and introduce just a little viscosity. This is what I did here also. I animated the viscosity from here to here. Just introduce a little viscosity which gonna slow down the water. I will render everything and I'll come back to you so we discuss the final results. Now all's done, and let's see the animation. It's coming and everything seems good. Here is exactly the effect we want, and basically exactly what as we want, and everything disappears at the end because we fade it very fast. We don't need to fade it very fast as we did here as example. The only reason I did that is that to show you how everything is controllable totally 100%. Here if we see it's the kind of this splash and this reaction for the water, it's extremely important because this is the basics of some other effects like rocket launching from under the water. I saw a lot of examples and even courses, and it's not as realistic as it should be. This is the kind of foam reaction and shading you need in such cases. Any bump or any explosion under the water which appear above the water, this is the kind of reaction we need. And again, see how the way the water is blending totally good with the splashes. Of course, we can increase this by increase the rendering quality and also introducing more particles. It's good always to introduce more particles. Remember, we had to duplicate them 3 times to get this result, especially the splash particles. The foam are good already. And also we can have one technique also to do something like that. And remember, this kind of water and the white element inside the water, which is above the sea level, is important in small scale, not medium scale splashes. As example, if I have a shark, I don't have a whale, a small shark, and the shark is jumping and everything should react with it, the water react with it. I don't think I need to introduce a lot of this kind of foam and splashes. In medium scale and small scale water simulation, we don't depend on the foam. We may introduce for sure some bubbles, but most of our shading method here, it's not the shader who's playing the good role. The white element here is because we have a lot of bubbles or foam particles underwater, which is white, and that's why we see this element. But in such cases which we don't have foam or splashes like the medium and small scale simulation scenes, the only way to produce this kind of whiteness is to link the shader here to the velocity or verticity of the water, which whenever the water is fast enough, a white element should be introduced to the shader color. Instead of blue, it should be, or just transparent, it should be whiter. So that's important to consider, because in a lot of scenes, if you see medium and small scenes, we see this kind of water. We don't see a lot of splashes like that. Again, for the medium and small scale water also, we tend to not use point for the foam shader like here, or the splash shader. We tend to use cellular and bubbles and splashes, and in all of these there will be actual and real refraction, which can introduce whatever we want. But again, if I were render only the body of the water here, it doesn't have enough details the amount of particles here I introduce is not as big as it should be. I would say 20 to 24 million particles would introduce more acceptable details. But again, what we did here is that we reduce this amount of details, and we introduce the foam points or the splash and foam particles in point shade in a large amount, which can replace that. So we don't need to introduce a lot of details in the ocean body. So again, this is very suitable for scenes which you have rocket coming out of the water, attack or something like that, and the shading and everything is depending on two lights. As you can see here, this light all is introduced by the ambient light. The only light is there just to light the scene totally. Sometimes we just light the body, the water body, and we let these get their light only by the sunlight and the ambient light. The environment, as you can see also here, is dimmed. It's not that bright. We can always change that by going to the material and by changing the way, like here I can just increase this overall multiplier for rendering processing for the map, and also I can increase the inverse gamma. But again, the good thing about this, if the camera is rotating right or left, you will see that the sky is reacting to this rotation. Means that if I will just go to perspective here and I try to change my camera, let's go to environment. Yeah, I'm just displaying that. Yeah, so again, if I will rotate my camera, the sky should rotate with it. So, or stay alone, and the camera gonna show that the sky is physically existing in this scene. This is all you need to know about this scene, and basically this scene is totally suitable for a whale jump, if we will introduce whale jumping from underwater, and that's what we will study in details next.